after I finished Women Move Mountains, I moved from Vermont to New York City. And that was the last day of 2019. So I moved in New Year's Eve, and obviously 2020, we all know what happened. And I found myself, you know, January 1st, 2020, by myself inside an empty apartment in New York. And I couldn't stop crying. I was crying because, I don't know, I just felt like it was such a, I was moving physically, but I was very moved also emotionally. And because my reaction is always to draw and write in my sketchbook, I decided to write down my experience. So I started my crying diaries. So I started to write every time I cried and draw every time I cried. And it also became a Twitter thread. So I would start writing, today I cried because I saw a little dog with a sweater, or I would cry at the grocery store or at the movies. So I would do all these entries in my crying diaries. And suddenly, like 2 months in, the pandemic hit and we were all in lockdown. And I was crying more than ever. And I was crying every day because I couldn't go back home to Argentina because the borders were closed. And I was here in this new city and everything felt very, very extreme. So that's when I started researching why we cry. And because I was crying so much, I wanted to know, and I've always been a big crier, and I always try to hide my tears. So I really wanted to know at what point in evolution we connected emotions with tears. So I found out that we are the only species that cry because of emotions. Our emotional tears have different components than our physical tears. And I, found out that basically our crying evolved as a kind of signal because we are born very vulnerable and we are born less formed than other species. So we need connection, we need other people to survive. And that's our first, the reason for our first tears when we are babies. But that social connection grows with us. And as we get, into adulthood, maybe our reasons for crying evolve, but our social connection, our need for social connection is still there. So I found this very interesting, and I started thinking about a book that could actually connect my own crying experience, but also add all this research and, the science of crying, the history, how tears change throughout different moments in time, how our perception of tears change, why it became taboo to cry, and why we hide our tears. And I started asking myself all these questions, and I wanted to also see, how tears were portrayed in art, and why we cry with movies, why we cry with songs, and also the gender aspect of crying. So all of that research is in the book, and it's all intertwined with my own crying diaries. So I'm gonna read a little bit from the book, if that's okay. This is the cover of the book, and I have it here too. It's all illustrated, and it has a lot of color because as I said before, I give myself some restrictions. So I wanted my own crying diaries to be all in the same color palette. So more of a cream color and a blue color. So that's for my own experience. But then the research is all very colorful because when I started thinking about the tear, I feel like tears are kind of like crystals and like almost like prisms that can like expand all the colors like a rainbow. And at first I was like, I'm gonna do this book all blue, but then I was like, maybe it's not just blue, because we can cry when we're happy, we can cry when we're feeling other things, other emotions. So I actually decided to do all the colors. So yeah, that's the book and that's the cover. We can go to the other slide. Oh, that's me crying. And that's me drinking my tears. I recommend drinking your tears. No, just kidding. Actually, tears evaporate very easily because they have a lot of salt. So it's not possible to feel a cup of tears. I wish it could be possible, but it's not. So yeah, I'm gonna start reading from the book. And it starts with this quote that I found, and I feel like it's when I first read it, I was like, this is the seed for this book. So it says, crying does not indicate that you're weak. Since birth, it has always been a sign that you are alive. Charlotte Bronte. When I feel like my brain is going to melt through my ears and through my eyes, I take a deep breath. I try to inhale every molecule of oxygen in the room. I cry a little, and my mind becomes crystal clear. Tears inside. I have always cried a lot. My mom says I cried steadily from the minute I was born until I turned 9 years old. I would cry at bumps, bruises, stressful situations, and misunderstandings. I cry all the time, and I used to feel self-conscious about it. For years, I wanted to control my crying. I would do anything to prevent tears from running down my face. I used to feel embarrassed and scared of being perceived as weak. Don't cry. A few years ago, I moved from Buenos Aires to New York City, and after hours and hours of crying inside my new empty apartment, I decided to start my crying diaries. I wrote down and drew every time I cried, and it helped me feel more connected to my tears. Research has found that in addition to being self-soothing, shedding emotional tears releases oxytocin and endorphins. These chemicals make you feel good. Crying may also ease anxiety. Tuesday, February 23rd, 2020. I woke up from a nap with tears in my eyes. In the past, crying my heart out helped me get through difficult and unpredictable times. Charles Darwin once declared emotional tears purposeless. Crying still remains largely taboo in society. Why is crying considered a bad thing? What does it mean if we cry, and why do we so often try to hide our tears? Crying is special. Humans are the only creatures whose tears can be triggered by their feelings. Crying here, crying there, crying everywhere. Crying is one of the most beautiful forms of bodily expression. We cry because we need other people, because we feel emotions deeply, because we are alive. Crying is completely normal. My wish for you tonight is that you laugh until you cry, and you cry until you laugh. Carl Sagan once said that humans are made of star stuff. Finding our place in the cosmos can be soul-stirring. Every time I look at the moon on a clear night, I am deeply moved and cry. Wednesday, September 2nd, 2020. I cried and fell asleep. Full moon in Pisces. Crying is the result of a fascinating chain reaction in the body. Human newborn babies do not have fully developed lacrimal glands and can't produce visible tears, but still frown and cry strongly to ask for love and assistance. Usually, babies start shedding really visible tears sometimes between 1 and 3 months of age. From birth, we cry because we need others. The crying wheel of fortune. You will cry at the grocery store. You will cry on the subway. You will cry at a party. You will cry in the shower. You will cry forever. You will cry in your dreams. You will cry artificial tears. You will cry on the phone. From the Greek catharsis, catharsis is an emotional release that provides renewal and restoration. Originally used by Aristotle in the Poetics, where he compared the effects of tragedy on the mind of a spectator to its effect on the body. In psychology, the term is associated with the Freudian psychoanalysis and is specifically related to the expression of buried trauma. When catharsis is successful, it brings trauma into consciousness, thus erasing it, which comes along with positive change. Cry, cry. Friday, May 14th, 2021. I cried during therapy. Classic. The summer the movie Titanic opened in theaters, I was 12 years old, and I had a big crush on Leonardo DiCaprio. I went to see it at the movie theater more than 7 times. Every time at the climax of the film, a big lump formed in my throat and the floodgates opened wide. My eyes became like two water fountains. I couldn't stop crying about Jack's death and the fact that I might never get to meet Leo DiCaprio in person. Years later, I saw Leonardo DiCaprio at the Electric Room in New York City, the night of my 27th birthday. I didn't cry. And now, if you want, for this part, you can close your eyes if you want and try and feel what I'm going to say, because this is practicing sense memory, which is bringing a feeling and emotion back. So if you want to close your eyes, I'm going to read and you have to do what I say. So close your eyes and visualize, see your parents' face in as much detail as possible. The outfit you wore to your first dance party. A starry summer sky from your childhood. Hear, listen, rain against the window, waves that come and go, the voice of your best friend. Smell, smoke from a bonfire, freshly baked bread. Taste, ice cream, buttery toast. Feel, a hot mug of tea in your hands, a feather tickling your cheeks. Did you cry on the inside? You can open your eyes. What do you feel when your loved ones cry? Crying has a purpose. Human tears have always been a part of evolution, helping us adapt to new realities. There's no point in holding them inside. Tears lubricate life, birth, and death. Crying is part of visible public acts of love and private expressions of pain. Monday, September 12th, 2022. I cried cleaning the oven and felt ready for the next stage of my life. Giving someone crying validation is essentially telling them that their reaction makes sense and that they can express emotion in a physical way. Humans are very diverse and react in different ways. So acknowledging other people's tears and feelings as valid is very healing for everyone, and it's a good practice for children and adults. If you find yourself inside a nebula, surrounded by cosmic dust, and you can't think right, remember, you are part of the Milky Way. You are here now. You don't need to hide in a molecular cloud. Your emotions, your tears in space, don't fall down. They become stars in the galaxy. Flower brain. Hey, there are flowers in the garden of your mind. You have planted your own memories. You can smell your thoughts. Eat the velvety petals of your ideas and water your brain with tears until it blooms. A tear is a universal sign and crying is evolution. Why is it normal to laugh together and cry alone? Crying brings out strong social bonding reactions, and people feel much more inclined to help those who are visibly producing tears. Understanding crying brings compassion and relief. You can transform your own feelings and help others by looking deeply into their crying. Sunday, October 24th, 2021. I cried looking for files on an external hard drive and thought about the people who store memories from my life. There's a magical place where tears meet laughter, and it feels like the ultimate human experience. Can you imagine the tears of the future? The end. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for listening to my reading. And now we have the first writing prompt, and which I would love you to think about your first crying memory and describe it in detail. Where were you and how did you feel? If you don't remember your first time crying or a crying episode from long ago, you can do you can write about the last time you cried. But think about what you were feeling. And also, I like to say that tears are teachers, because even if we're, crying because of something silly or something that might be more physical or something that doesn't feel as important, there's a deeper meaning to our tears. So think about how you were feeling at the time and what was the reason for your crying, but also the secondary reason or the underlying reason for your crying. So we have 5 minutes to write, and if you want to share on the chat, I think you can do that. An image-based poem. So sometimes I start by writing scripts with words, and sometimes I start by drawing and then adding words that connect those drawings. And a lot of times in my sketchbook, I divide the page in 4, and I kind of write these poems or haikus with the images. So I would draw something that it's more of a close-up or something more related to science on the first panel. I would do, a middle shot or a close-up of a face, my face or someone's face, and then objects, and then more of a metaphorical and visual metaphor drawing. So what I like to do whenever I'm drawing, I'm writing for an image or I'm drawing based on an image, is trying to see, you can describe what you're seeing. You can just, describe what you're seeing visually, but you can also add whatever you remember. For example, the first panel here is like, it feels like, an eye transition into a more open eye, or almost like the infinite symbol, and then the pupils widening. So you can, write something about what you remember about the science of the eyes. Then on the second sentence or the second panel, you can write more of a feeling or a more like an emotion. On the third panel, you can write, what you see or describe a game or an action, like something that is happening. And then on the last panel, more of like a conclusion, but also a more philosophical or a more descriptive, but in a sensory aspect. So yeah, I think you can just write 4 sentences, a short poem based on this image. And you don't have to do like every panel. You can just focus on one part of the image if you want. But try and, describe the image in your mind and then write whatever comes to you. And it can also be related to the colors and the textures. So yeah, if you want to start writing, you have 3 minutes. So we're gonna start doing that now.
Thank you everyone for joining tonight. And once again, Lata, if you could stay on with us, we'll grab your information for the giveaway. And thank you, Pepita.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, everyone, and happy tears.